Vietnam's Mekong Delta, it is a water world cut through by rivers and tributaries, crisscrossed by streams, canals, and irrigation channels. Water provides the key means of transport for equipment, for goods, for people. But it's a way of life under severe threat due to extreme weather. Typhoons and flooding frequently batter the delta. At other times, it suffers from erratic and low rainfall.
Another major problem is saline or saltwater intrusion. During the dry season, saltwater is pushing further and further inland, causing serious consequences for agriculture, aquaculture, and people's lives.
In this coastal province, even those living right next to rivers, like mother of three, Pham Thi Mai Trin, have struggled to get enough fresh water for their daily needs.
Dễ sống hơn hồi lúc trước, vậy đó. Như hồi lúc trước đó thì kiểu có nước mặn thì đây bà con người ta trồng trọt đâu được, phải đổi nước, phải lúc đó là phải đổi, mình không có nước mưa rồi mình phải đi đổi, phải kêu nó vô tới nhà đem vô, một lần đi kêu vô vậy là 80-90 ngàn có một máy mình nhín thì được uống, mà từ từ đó thì cũng cả tuần.
She and her family often haven't had enough fresh water to use for rearing animals, subsisting only on one rice crop a year. It was crippling their income. The Mekong Delta's economy has been built around abundant fresh water. The delta produces more than half of Vietnam's rice crop and 70% of its output from fish and shrimp farming. Some 17 million people live in the delta, and climate change is imperiling the livelihoods of many.
Impacts are already the daily reality. It's no more a threat. It's a very brutal reality for the Mekong River Delta. There's daily erosion, and every year Mekong River Delta lose around 800 hectares of arable lands.
It's flood and drought, storms as well, mudslides. The events are not new. I think what is new is the occurrence and the volatility of these events. It's the frequency and the magnitude of the events that is really very, very problematic for Vietnam. So when farmers are telling you they're finding it hard to predict weather patterns and what's going to happen, then you know it's something new.
Farmers are struggling to cope with that unpredictability and feeling a very real threat to their incomes.
Nhưng mà nếu mà có biến đổi khí hậu thì cái nhiệt độ nắng rất là nóng. Thứ hai nữa là khi nắng nóng thì cái lịch thời vụ nó sẽ phải tuân theo cái khác, và do cái điều kiện nắng nóng thì có một số cái vùng phải chuyển đổi cây trồng.
As far as 90 kilometers inland, salinity is rising to worrying levels. In the waterways, in the groundwater, on the farmland. This saline intrusion is making the water too salty to rear fish in some places, and seriously hitting rice harvests as well. The Vietnamese government, with backing from international agencies, is working to ease the hardship. In this area, authorities have built sluice gates to prevent salt water pushing upstream during the dry season and to raise freshwater levels behind the gate.
Cái thứ hai nữa là cái người dân là cái được là thụ hưởng là hưởng lợi là cái do là cái dư là dưỡng ngọt và cái nâng cao đảm bảo đủ nước tưới là cái cho vụ 3 là cái khoảng là cái trên là 100 là cái 10.000 là cái người dân.
It is transforming the fortunes of the area's rice farmers.
Trước kia đó nó là làm một vụ là với nước mặn, làm được có vụ mưa là 6 tháng làm vụ mưa, tới tháng 11 mới là thu hoạch. Thì sau vậy cách mạng thành công rồi đó thì hàng kinh với dẫn nước ngọt vô làm được 3 vụ. Bây giờ tháng này là làm là vụ đầu. Rồi tới tháng 8 trở lên, tháng 11 làm vụ nữa là 2 vụ. Tháng 11 làm tới ra viên là vụ nữa là 3 vụ là thu hoạch.
In another part of the Delta, Vietnam's Sustainable Agriculture Transformation Project, or VNSAT, is helping farmers grow strains of rice better suited to the changing climate. It has helped farmers like Lê Văn Den and his young family.
Về cái dự án VNSAT thì là có bên cán bộ bên kỹ thuật có xuống tập huấn hướng dẫn nông dân sản xuất theo cái quy trình 3 giảm 3 tăng, 1,5 giảm cho nông dân áp dụng vào trong sản xuất, thì từ đó thì tăng thêm thu nhập.
Lê's village is also benefiting from VNSAT's efforts to help them rely less on rice and to cultivate alternative crops like flowers and fruit.
This is where the changes of Vietnam agriculture have to be adapted to climate change. In some areas in Vietnam, some transition to more resilient crop, some transition to less water consumptive crops, some transition to brackish water are fundamental.
As great as the threat of climate change is to agriculture, there's a lot more at stake.
For a longer future, if the sea level rise by 100 centimeters to the end of the century, maybe 38% of the Mekong River Delta underwater. And it's a very dramatic scenario.
Can Tho City is the economic heart of the Mekong Delta, with a population of some 1.25 million. But it's no more immune to the impact of climate change than the surrounding countryside. In just the past dozen or so years, the maximum tide in this low-lying city has risen some 20 to 30 centimeters.
The city has been being hit by flooding dozens of times a year, and experts project that to get far more frequent in the years ahead.
Vietnam is growing fast. Vietnam is urbanizing fast. And Vietnam is also industrializing fast. So you have the combination of the natural events, the man-made events. And those combinations make the dimension of climate change for Vietnam even more crucial.
Vietnam's government has implemented a national strategy to cope with the threat of climate change and has greatly reduced the loss of life from extreme weather. It is partnering with international development agencies to further beef up its infrastructure.
We are trying to help government mainstream into their development planning more climate change awareness. So these mitigation measures are not sort of afterthoughts.
The Mekong Delta is far from alone in Vietnam in seeing and feeling the serious impacts of extreme weather. In the central city of Da Nang, fishing boats take shelter from an approaching typhoon. When it hits, the nearby UNESCO heritage city of Hoi An bears the brunt of it. It might look quaint, like a sort of Asian Venice, but this is how Hoi An is supposed to look. People here say the annual flooding is getting worse, disrupting the tourism that is the town's lifeblood and causing significant losses for local merchants.
但是很难哦，我来得及的，放高就可以了。如果来不及的，它在水里面一定就坏了。
And in the Highlands, in the country's north, a region where most people struggle to eke a living from subsistence farming, and the incidence of poverty is at its highest, more frequent and extended drought is the new reality.
Vâng, về thời tiết thì bây giờ nó khác với ngày xưa, nó nóng hơn. Ở cái bản này thì nó đúng hơn là nước sinh hoạt thì thiếu. Nó không đủ nước sinh hoạt, mùa này, mùa tháng 4, tháng 5 này nước sinh hoạt phải san sẻ thôi, không đủ. Thật ra mà nói thì không có nước để sinh hoạt, tức là tắm giặt, mình chỉ san sẻ để ăn uống thôi. Cái bản như thế, cho nên nó ảnh hưởng đến cái đời sống của bà con là chắc là đến cuối năm có thể là về cái thu hoạch lúa ngô không biết nó có đạt được không.
2,000 kilometers to the south in the Mekong Delta, people are learning important, if painful, lessons about the need to be less reliant on rice production or even traditional agriculture. That's especially true in areas where water is brackish, a mixture of salt and fresh water.
It will be essential to completely shift from agricultural practices which were mainly based on fresh water to economic practices which are going to be based on brackish water.
There are also some opportunities amid all the challenges and risks.
Instead of 3 rice harvests, now they move from 1 rice harvest and 1 shrimp harvest. And the shrimp harvest is much more profitable. And the revenue of the shrimp, it's 300% higher than rice. Maybe sometimes it's even 500%.
In the Delta, on the front line of Vietnam's struggles with a changing climate, efforts to ease the impact are showing promise. Fanti Maitrin and her family are far better off since the construction of the sluice gate in 2018.
Rồi nuôi thì chăn nuôi thì dễ dàng hơn, rồi nước nó sạch sẽ hơn, nó chỉ sống là thoải mái hơn là hơn lúc trước á, đỡ hơn lúc.
Adaptation, preparedness, mitigation, these are not just catchphrases in Vietnam's struggle to cope with the impact of climate change. They are imperative if the country is not to see the erosion of the economic gains it has made, and also to ensure its people don't slip back into poverty.